We are very privileged to gather here today for the 164th birth anniversary of Rabindranath Tagore. I would like to welcome to all the guests for our session today. And our first speaker is Mr. Nirjhar Mukharjee. He is the head and assistant professor of political science working in Berhampore College, West Bengal. Our second speaker is Dr. Sushmita Gonsalves, Madam, and she is working as Associate Professor of Political Science in Scottish Church College, West Bengal. And our third speaker is Dr. Manoj Datta. He is working as Assistant Professor of History, Alia University, West Bengal. Our schedule will be, we will be giving each and each speaker will present for 15 to 20 minutes, and once the speaker complete with their presentations, we will go to the question answer session, and the participants, please write your questions in the chat box and we will get back to you, and try to limit your questions to the seminar and the topics only. Okay, I would like to welcome Sir Dilip sir to say some words before starting the discussion. Thank you.
Sir,
Sir, you
please
are on
help.
mute. Hmm.
No, you are not audible, sir.
Now,
Yes,
am I
yes, yes,
audible
yes,
now? Yeah.
yes, yes, sir.
Very good evening to everybody for this memorable event. That is, we are going to celebrate our Guru Rabindranath Tagore's 164th birthday. And on that occasion, we are, in fact, organizing a national seminar related with his life, his philosophy, and his political thoughts and other things. And I hope that the participants will give a new light on his visions related with different aspects of life. And I hope that the participants will be very much happy to participate in this seminar in a very active manner. And they are very free to present their thoughts in their own way whenever they will give the questions. And I also welcome the speakers who will speak on this occasion, and they will feel free to speak from their own hearts about our Rabindranath Tagore. So, thanks to everybody, and I believe that our session may be carried on by our Sohini.
Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank our conveners, Rijit sir and Rahul sir. This is an effort. This webinar is not just showing tribute to the Rabindranath Tagore, but it is an invitation to engage critically with the many layers of his work. And today's seminar will focus insights from political science, history, literature, and gender studies.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to welcome our first speaker, Mr. Nirjhar Mukherjee, and he will be speaking on transversing Tagore's relentless criticism of nationalism through select texts. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes, sir, you are audible.
you are audible.
Okay, so Tagore is a vast genius. His work encompasses something which is rather, or at least close to impossible for a human being to, to study in one lifetime. So, what my lecture will be about is about his criticism of nationalism through a few texts. I mean, it is almost impossible to make a comprehensive analysis of Tagore in 1 hour or 10 hours or maybe even 100 hours. But I will try to touch upon some important points and some important themes which are pertinent to Tagore's understanding of nationalism. Now, we all know that Tagore was a strong and persistent critique of the idea of nationalism. In an age where nationalism was gaining real currency and across the world, including in India, Tagore was not someone who got swayed away by nationalism. Rather, he was a lone soldier against a lot of vituperative hardship that he spoke out against the maladies of nationalism. So my talk will not be about the discussion of his book, on nationalism, like, of course, which was not a book per se, but it was a series of lectures that he delivered abroad in China, in Japan, and the United States. While that is there, it's important. My lecture would discuss certain texts and how they engage with the ideas of nationalism. So what I'll do is that I will start by drawing upon the sources of Tagore's political thought. Let me make it clear, this is about Tagore's political thought. Now, Tagore had a plethora of influences. He drew them from myriad sources, and it was a rather large bunch to discuss. I will only discuss some important aspects of Tagore's political thought, some of its important sources, then connect it with his critique of nationalism. Then I will go on to discuss 3 or 4 texts, mainly Gora, Ghore Baire, Gora, Ghore Baire, and nationalism. And if time permits, maybe within half a minute or something, Loraier Moon. Now, there are other important texts as well, which are very, very important. But then, as I said, select texts, because I don't have the time to go into so much. Okay, so in my way of analysis, to understand Tagore's political ideas, there are 3 major sources. Now, in order to fatten the textbook, you can divide those 3 sources into many other sources. You can add others. These 3 are the intellectual milieu of the 19th century and the Bengal Renaissance, which led to the Brahmo Samaj movement. Now, I combine these 2 points into 1 point. So basically, there are 3 important sources of Tagore's political thought. The first is the intellectual milieu of 19th century Bengal and the aftermath of Bengal Renaissance, and resultantly the Brahmo Samaj movement. 2, Tagore's love for nature, and his Prakriti Prem, as we know it, which is again connected to the first one. Then third, Tagore's engagement with Western modernity, modern rational Western education system. Now, these 3 are connected to each other, as we see that the Brahmo Samaj movement was itself a result of Western modernity. It was an intercourse between Indian spiritualism and Western modernity, trying to rationalize religion, trying to create a logical religion. These are projects that Raja Ram Mohan Roy engaged with. Again, so I don't have much time, but I would just like to highlight this point. Then the second part is that Tagore's engagement with nature. We all know Tagore was a great Prakriti Premi, or he was a great lover of nature. But this love for nature has a deep connection with Brahmo theology. Brahmo theology, yes. In the Brahmo Samaj movement, we must understand that Brahmo Samaj movement rejected large aspects of the Vedas. Almost entirely it rejected the Puranas and idolatry and others. For Tagore, this was very important, because for the Brahmo Samajists, the Upanishads were very important. And while the Upanishads spoke of one God, in the Upanishads, it would be wrong to say that the Brahmo Samajist religion is a monotheistic religion, because the correct word would be a monistic religion. So the difference between monotheism and monism lies in the fact that in monotheism there is a distinction between the creator and the created. So God is the creator and the created is different from God. Now again, there are different theologies of different religions and various theological aspects in various religious schools. I don't have time or scope in this lecture to go deeply into that. I'll just mention one or two. For example, in some monotheistic traditions, such as some traditions of Judaism known as the Kabbalah tradition, there is something like where you try to find God within yourself, you try to connect with God. That kind of tradition is there. Then within some sects of Orthodox Christianity, there is something known as theosis, where you become one with God. Then there are some such esoteric traditions within Islam as well, within some Sufi orders and all. But then in most traditions of monotheism, there is a difference between the creator and the created. But the Upanishadic tradition, which the Brahmo Samaj broadly draws upon, over there is no marked distinction between the creator and the created. So all creation is ultimately woven into that one thread. Okay, so when Tagore sings, pens these lines like Akash Bhara, Surjo Tara, Vishwa Bhara Pran, he actually finds oneness in the universe in his theology. Well, the topic of this lecture is not Tagore's theology, but if one wants to understand why Tagore rejects nationalism, this point has to be taken into account. Because like we know, in where Tagore is a deep lover of nature, Tagore actually criticizes this entire scheme of things where we are seen as separate from nature. And in Tagore's philosophy, there is a continuous attempt to overcome the boundaries. Shimar Majhe Ashim Tumi, trying to overcome the boundaries, trying to overcome limits, and to be one with everyone else, because again, we are all connected. So this is something that makes Tagore a great egalitarian, a great egalitarian, a huge sense of equality, where you cannot separate persons based on narrow walls, be it on the notion of caste, be it on the notion of sect, language, or even nation. So I'm not going to waste the time of this audience by going through those quotations of nationalism where he vituperatively attacks nationalism. But what I am going to tell you is, because like I have around 15 minutes to talk, but out of which I spent 7 or 8 minutes discussing Tagore's theology and his philosophy, that these narrow walls, these sectarian lines are redundant to Tagore because of his egalitarianism that comes from the Brahmo Samaj philosophy. And again then the third point, Western Enlightenment. Ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity. Well, as we will be discussing, he is also a strong critic of Western modernity, but he doesn't do it from an irredentist point of view. He doesn't do it from any chauvinistic point of view. What he does is, what does he do? He uses logic to counter it. While Tagore rejected nationalism, which again he directly called out as an invention of Western modernity. He rejected the mechanization and atomization of society based on capitalism and Western modernity. He would not lapse into an illogical way of thinking. Logical way of thinking and analyzing through logic, that is something which is consistent in Tagore. Well, a lot of people call Tagore a romantic poet. Well, he was romantic, that's fine, but even in his ruminations, he was never anti-logic. He was never anti-logic. Sometimes he superseded logic. Okay, but there I come to two important texts. One is Gora and Ghore Baire. Now these are very famous texts, and I see some of our friends who have joined from other parts of India. Gora and Ghore Baire. Ghore Baire means the home and the world. You people can read the novel in English, and as far as I know, it has been translated into Hindi as well, and other international languages, maybe other Indian languages also. And as far as the Bengali speakers are concerned, like you can read the novel as well as you can watch the movies of both these novels. Now in Gora, we see that Gora is a nationalist. Gora is a strong, bright young man. Gora is a strong, bright young man, a young student who cares for others, who cares for the society. Now he has become a nationalist. He studies in a Western education system, in a school, college, whatever. He has gone through the Western education system. He's educated in modernity. But what does Western modernity do to Gora? What does Western modernity do to Gora? Gora becomes a nationalist. But what does nationalism do to him? He becomes a narrow-minded person. And again, see, Tagore was writing this more than 100 years ago. Even in that time, Tagore showed how the so-called Indian nationalism was actually degenerating into Hindu chauvinism, and how Indian nationalism was being framed in terms of like Hindu orthodoxy and Hindu chauvinism, and he criticized it. Now, in contrast to Gora is his mother, Anandamoyi, who's Gora's mother. Now, Anandamoyi is not a very educated woman. She is an ordinary Hindu woman who does her puja daily, okay, who does her puja and all. But it is shown that her mother, who is not educated in a modern educational system, she is more open-minded than her son, who is actually educated in the modern sense. Now we see a lot of people who spread hatred online. They are highly academically qualified, but are they educated? Is that nationalism which they are using to spew hatred, is that actually creating good people? Is education creating good people? The answer is no, because Tagore shows that nationalism actually creates divide. Nationalism creates divide, and it actually creates, these boundaries. So what we see is that the great nationalist Gora, the Hindutvabadi Gora, the patriot Gora, okay, his birth secret comes into the open. It is known that he's not a Hindu. Forget Hindu. He's not even an Indian. He's not even an Indian, because he is basically an abandoned Irish baby. An Irish baby. He's a European, a Christian, biologically, if you think of it that way, from the Orthodox point of view. So Gora, who is an Orthodox Hindu leader, finds out that he is not a Hindu himself from that point of view. So where will Gora go? Here Anandamoyi plays a very important role, because Anandamoyi is a very important character over here. Anandamoyi did not accept Gora because he was a Hindu or something like that. Anandamoy did not accept him because of any religious background or anything like that, but because she was a mother and for a love for a baby. So the universal motherhood. Now, through Anandamoy, Rabindranath shows that Anandamoy is a very ordinary woman, but that ordinary woman reflects the cultural spirit of India. That cultural spirit which does not discriminate. That cultural spirit which does not discriminate, it takes into its own everyone. The real Vasudeva Kutumbakam thing, world is family. There is no caste, no nation, no religion, nothing. So in the binary of nationalism, where it is this nation or that nation, you are a nationalist or you are an anti-national. In this world, in this got up game, in this constructed wretched world of nationalism, Gora has no place. So where will Gora go? If Gora has to find his identity, he has to find his identity in the idea of India, which precedes nationalism, which is above nationalism, which is not narrow as nationalism. Okay, now since I'm running out of time, I'll quickly go into Ghore Baire. Ghore Baire is another amazing novel because it shows a dialogue between two friends who were friends at their now basically Nikhil and Sandeep. Now Sandeep is a city dweller, Nikhil is a zamindar, but Nikhil is shown to be a benevolent zamindar. Okay, now they were both friends. They were both friends in the educational institute, but now Sandeep has become a passionate nationalist. A passionate nationalist of the boycott and Swadeshi movement. But Nikhil, who is a zamindar, now in a village. Now Sandeep goes to Nikhil and he asks help from Nikhil. He asks Nikhil to contribute financially and in other ways to the nationalist cause. Now Nikhil is a rational person. He is not a greedy person. He is not a so-called bad zamindar or a nationalist person. What Nikhil does is Nikhil actually exposes some of the fallacies of the nationalist movement. Okay, so we know Swadeshi and boycott. Okay, if you want to boycott British goods, you have to give the Swadeshi alternative. But Swadeshi alternative goods were more expensive. For the village people who were very, very poor and like extraordinarily poor, starving people, they already had almost nothing to eat and nothing to wear. For such people, if you force more expensive goods upon them, can they afford it? Maybe some middle class urban people, they could afford Swadeshi. But could the people of the rural areas afford Swadeshi? Then again in Ghore Baire it is shown that how there were communal tensions being raked up in the name of Swadeshi movement. Because you see, Tagore discusses in the, because Nikhil is the zamindar in somewhere in East Bengal, now Bangladesh. Tagore himself, he was a zamindar. He had his zamindari in Bangladesh, erstwhile East Bengal, East Pakistan, Bangladesh, whatever you call it. Over there, the communal tension, Hindu versus Muslim, most of the tenants, most of the landless peasants, they were Muslims. And when these Swadeshi people were going with nationalist slogans rooted in Hindu traditions, that was creating communal divide. So basically, Ghore Baire was actually a postmodern text 60 years before the term postmodern was even coined. Because Tagore deals with complexities. He debunks. Tagore debunks binaries. Tagore goes beyond binaries. He goes into nuances. He talks about the relativity of truth. What might be true for a urban middle class educated Calcutta dwelling young man for Swadeshi movement may not be true. It may not be the reality for a villager in East Bengal who is famished, who is facing destitution. So there are various aspects of reality, and nationalism is nationalism is not a holistic vision. It shows only one aspect. It shows only one aspect of reality, or only one reality. But there are many other realities in this world. Nationalism fails to grasp with nuances. It creates binaries. Now Tagore problematizes what nationalism wrongly tries to simplify. What nationalism wrongly tries to simplify, Tagore problematizes. There are no clear blacks and whites. There are various shades. Well, I guess Tagore wouldn't have agreed to shades of grey. There are various shades of many colors over there. So, as I will be having my other colleagues who will be discussing Tagore on gender, Tagore on history and other important aspects, they must be knowing more than me on how Tagore problematizes. Tagore is someone who speaks of nuance. Tagore is not someone who discusses things in blacks and whites. And actually that is the problem over here. So, you are opposed to nationalism. So you are a dalal of the British. No, that's not the reality. As Nikhil talks about his patriotism, but his patriotism is not nationalism. His patriotism is not nationalism. And then again, in the book Nationalism, the book means these were actually lectures which Tagore gave in the end of 1916 and early 1917, At that time, World War I was going on, and that totally devastated Tagore emotionally. And Tagore was livid. And in fact, Tagore had to face rather scornful vituperation in China, where a lot of Chinese intellectuals called Tagore a coward. Many Chinese leaders called him a stooge of the British, a coward, and many other harsh words. Why? Because Tagore did not support Chinese nationalism. Tagore did not support nationalism of any kind. Mind you, the kind of nationalisms we are talking about, these are not chauvinistic nationalisms of blank chest thumping, or using nationalism to win votes or other cheap politics. This was a nationalism of fighting for your independence, something that's very serious, something that even Marxists are sympathetic towards. Even Marxists are sympathetic towards nationalist movements which are national liberation movements. But Tagore was opposed to all kinds of nationalism. At that point of time, the Chinese were going through humiliation by the Western powers and all. But Tagore did not support Chinese nationalism. Tagore praised a lot of things about Japan, but he strongly criticized the cruelties of Japanese nationalism, which expanded into imperialism. And obviously, I'm not going to go into how harshly he criticized European nationalism. A lot of people kind of say that no, Tagore spoke of an inclusive good nationalism, but that is actually a wrong assessment in my opinion, or even if you read Tagore directly perhaps. That is because while Tagore did write many patriotic songs, he did have a nationalist phase in his youth, in his 20s and early 30s. But right from the early 1900s, he had strongly gone against nationalism. He was very strongly against nationalism, like right from 1904, like he had been writing against nationalism, and this hadn't changed. But okay, as I was saying, Tagore was against binaries. What does it mean to be against binary? Oh, you are against nationalism, so you are an anti-national. Or those days, as they would say, oh, you are against nationalism, that means you are a dalal of the British Empire. No, it's not like that. Reality is much more nuanced. It's much more complex. There are many shades of grey, various other shades in between. You cannot straitjacket the world into these binaries of nationalism, anti-national, like that. No, that's not how it works. There are various other aspects of reality. Then,
Sir,
I'm out of time. I'll just take 3 minutes. May I get 3 minutes, moderator?
Okay.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yes, good.
I
Okay.
will just spend around a minute on another book, another essay called Laurier Moon. This was an essay, which it was more of it was an editorial actually that Tagore had written. In Laurier Moon, Tagore takes a position which which uh, which has a lot of similarities with Marxism, because uh, he talks about how the fight for economic resources, the fight for the control of markets, that's the main thing behind this nationalist fervor, this nationalist madness. This nationalist madness and fervor, this is actually all for economic control. And there are big capitalists, big vested interests who want to profit. And it is this lust for profit which drives people into nationalistic sentiments and imperialistic sentiments. Well, this is actually very much akin to Lenin's theory of imperialism as the highest form of capitalism. Tagore was, again framing it in other words, in but there are stark similarities. Well, Tagore also had problems with Marxism, because as we get to know from his letters from Russia's Chithi, but then again, Tagore's engagement with Marxism and socialism is perhaps topic for many other books or many other lectures. I will say he was also against the mechanical understanding of socialism, so-called scientific socialism as it existed. So Tagore criticized nationalism both from a spiritual point of view, a humanistic point of view, as well as from a logical point of view. Because from Tagore was not someone who would abandon logic under the intoxication of emotions and sentiments. And as Tagore was a deep thinker, a genius who could see through the fallacies of interpreting the world in black and white. So, as I would end with his quotation, he would not trade diamonds for pieces of glass. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful lecture on the various aspects of nationalism. And I just want to give say one sentence before going to our next speaker, that when we are now as Indian, and if you see in the syllabus also, the government is also encouraging us to learn about the indigenous knowledge system. So it becomes important to also understand Tagore's perspective on the Western modernity, Western education, because as sir said that we should not, or we must not return back to irredentism, where we have to embrace all the traditions irrespective of discriminations based on sex, caste, gender. So we have to be very cautious while studying the indigenous knowledge system, while also incorporating ourselves with the modern ideologies of secularism, liberty, freedom, etc., democracy. Okay. So thank you, sir. Please be with us, and I hope I think students and the participants have many questions from you, and we will get back to you. Okay, so I'm going to our second speaker. Uh, we welcome Dr. Sushmita Gonsalves, Madam. She is working as Associate Professor of Political Science in Scottish Church College, Kolkata. Uh, Her topic is Women in Tagore's Novels and Plays, the Gender Aspect and Their Political and Social Roles.
Am I audible to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
So, at the very outset, a warm good evening to all of you present here, and I would like to thank the Global Authors Forum for allowing me to speak on this topic today. But right at the beginning, I want to make it very clear that I am from social sciences, and my area of interest is gender and sexuality. So I'm not so much into literature, especially Bengali literature, but Sohini did ask me to speak. So I took on this daring attempt, which I find very intimidating because I am not any kind of an expert in this area. Yes, I do work on gender, which is why I chose the topic Tagore's negotiations with the feminine. And that is what I wanted to understand today. Tagore's negotiations with the feminine were deeply problematic for himself and his times and continue to perplex us, his readers, today. Perhaps for that reason, we tend to return repeatedly to those unforgettable portrayals in his fiction and poetry, song and philosophy. But readers of too long trusted Tagore's own rather simple ways of expressing his intuitively complex understanding of the feminine as a concept, a trope, and a manifestation. Now, did Tagore lean towards the performative idea of gender as a performativity, or the normative and traditional way of looking at gender? When we talk about performativity, gender being something which is performed on a day-to-day basis, I am reminded of Judith Butler. Judith Butler said that we do perform our gender every day, which is why if I perform the role of a man, then I do don the garb of a man. So my gender is not something which I get when I am born, but I do perform it. Now, Tagore's use of androgynous principles has received very little attention, partly because they occur as subtle subversions of the patriarchal norm. Androgyny is but one example of how the subject of Tagore and the feminine commands new attention. And I also believe that today we should focus on his female heroines, rather. This is very, very important. Now, Tagore's vast corpus can lead to fruitful debates on feminism and gender identity that remain implicit throughout his work. I hardly know a 1% of them, but from whatever I have gathered, I have understood, every time I've read his novels or gone through his dance dramas, most importantly, my characters will be from them. I have been awed by the way they have been portrayed, and considering the time period when they were portrayed, it was really, really amazing. There are surprisingly candid poems on the body and sensuality, issues that are being discussed today as a part of radical feminism. And not only that, clever play with mythology, deep empathy with rural poverty and women's deprivation, and exploration of the woman nation equivalence, challenges to patriarchy, while there are also tributes to women's familial role. Today, what I would suggest is that I would look at the main aspect of Tagore, which is in two women characters. One, I'm looking at a play in which he has brought about a very interesting lady. Here he has discussed androgyny, which is what I'm going to come up today. So let me begin with the first character. Literature is replete with portraits of male chauvinistic heroes and leaders. I am talking about Chitrangada today, who exhibit open displays of leadership owing to the respective power positions or privileges bestowed on them. However, literature offers us few precious examples of female leadership. Some of these female leaders also enjoy advantages of position or power privileges over their male counterparts. Chitrangada, as an example of female leadership, analyzes this character in the light of 6 factors of leadership. First of all, the deliberate suppression of femininity. I repeat, the deliberate suppression of femininity is shown almost as a strategy for wielding power. Who is she? She is a princess from Manipur as the leader and sole heir of her father's kingdom. Her people revere her and look up to her as their protector. However, Tagore has painted her in multiple shades, and those are what interests me. She does not mind suppressing her femininity according to the demands of the situation. She cross-dresses as a male to exert her dominance. This is what is important as far as the LGBTQI movement is also concerned. Tagore's lyrical drama Chitra introduces her to Princess Chitrangada, who impresses Arjuna with her martial skills, leading him to believe that she is a man. Being plain and unattractive and at the same time impersonating as a man, Chitra feels she needs divine intervention to win her love. She uses her boon from the god of love to transform into a beautiful woman to win Arjun's affection. She knows that this is temporary. It's going to fade away. This transformation is temporary, as the god of love had granted her beauty for only one day. She also knows that her subsequent marriage can only grant her an impermanent relationship. Today, when I look at the questions of the modern woman, I see many of these interesting dilemmas that are striking modern women today also. Now, these dramas were written before a huge span of time. What is so important and relevant is that these aspects of the feminine are important and relevant to us today even more than ever. And that is what makes this so important. Chitrangada shows transformational leadership. This again takes us to another theory. That is a leadership theory. I'm not coming to that now. While defining political leaders, according to Burns, a very famous work, person who has written on transformational leadership in the year 1978, transformational leaders can cause significant changes in the lives of people around them. These leaders are idealized in the form of moral exemplars working for the benefit of the team or organization. Bernard M. Bass extended this concept of transformational leadership by trying to measure the impact of transformational leadership on follower motivation and performance. Now, possession of certain traits only does not guarantee that I am a leader. It is certain that effective leaders are different from others, but situational factors, the very important word is situational factors, have been analyzed in the role in the success of a leader. Chitrangada meets Arjun in a forest. She is distractingly enamored by him and forgets to pay him respects. After all, he was the idol of her dreams. But she realizes that her masculine form and skill may not be enough to impress Arjuna, and she seeks help from the god of love. But I would say Tagore's Chitrangada is more than just a love story of a princess. It has many hard-hitting, multiple layers of femininity that each can be the subject of a separate PhD thesis. So she herself is such a motivational character that she has an individual rises. She has a personal turmoil. All of us have. We women often face trauma and turmoil in our life. We have identity questions. When we face marriage, we have an identity crisis. When we become a mother, we have a second identity crisis. When we become in-laws, we become another identity crisis. The turmoil in our minds. She is facing a separate turmoil. Her turmoil is a personal turmoil to embrace the demands of her state and the demands of her love. So here, what is making her so unique and beautiful is that she shows the charisma of a leader. When we studied political sociology, we did study leadership. There are three kinds of leadership: charismatic leadership and different kinds of leadership. Chitrangada falls into the domain, as far as I understand, charismatic leadership, who is able to inspire her people. However, on an individual level, she exhibits transformational leadership and inspires a leadership through example. So, the world is probably, I would conclude with one line, then I'll go to my next character. I'll just speak about two people here today. The world is probably waiting for more examples of women leaders to change the rarity complex around them and identify women's leadership as an acceptable norm. Now, why did I choose this topic today? Today is the best day to speak of women's leadership because one important factor is we are celebrating Rabindra Jayanti, but more than that, I felt we should pick up and honor the exemplary leadership shown by Colonel Sophia Qureshi and Wing Commander uh, Wing Commander Bhumika Singh. So I thought, why not speak of a leadership that is taking us to the heights of glory? Why not talk about a historic moment in history that Chitrangada showed and a historic moment today that these two women, Wing Commander Bhumika Singh and Sophia Qureshi, is showing us. So from here we understand Tagore's idea of leadership has not changed much. The fact that he gave an importance to a woman leader who can rise above personal turmoil and be a ruler of a state, at the same time she was human because she had feelings of love, which she wanted to express, but she was unable to do. So this dilemma between the personal and the political, she was facing a dilemma between the personal and the political. This is so beautifully brought out in this dance drama. So that is what made me so much eager and interested to talk about her. Now, the second lady who is very important today, because my entire work when I was doing my PhD, it was on caste. I worked on the Dalit women. So when I was working on the Dalit women, they are at the triple intersection of caste, which is class, caste, and gender. So they are the people who are marginalized three times. From here, I would pick up Tagore's Chondalika. Prakriti, a woman from a marginalized caste, undergoes a profound transformation, moving from societal constraints to a blossoming sense of self. In Chondalika, another dance drama by Tagore, she initially struggles with her low caste identity and societal expectations. But through a unique encounter with a Buddhist monk, she experiences a newfound understanding of her own worth and personality. This realization, though intertwined with personal desires, once again, the personal is there as a part of the feminine, and with it is contesting the political, the relationship with the outer world. Ultimately leads her to question societal norms. Here we see an act of rebellion, a radical feminism, which was unheard of when these dance dramas were being written, and seek a path towards liberation. Prakriti is born into the Chandal caste and an outcast group in Hindu society and faces constant discrimination and humiliation. We know the stories. I'm not coming to an explanation of the stories. I am coming to an analysis of their characters and why are they so appealing for me. She is confined to the fringes of the society, denied access to basic human rights. Her story is also a fight for basic human rights, which we are doing every minute, and treated as inferior. Her interaction with the Buddhist monk Ananda sparks a transformative change in her perception of herself and her place in the world. His presence and teachings challenged her so much, challenged her ingrained beliefs about the caste and her own worth, prompting her to question societal norms and hierarchies. So both my women heroines are rebels, radical feminists from that point of view. So they, I will proudly say, they are the heralds of radical feminism and not the Western world, not Europe and America. I'm sorry. We find radical feminists in our very fold. We just don't see them. We just don't have the lens to recognize them. That is what is important. Prakriti's awakened sense of self leads to a desire of a life free from societal constraints, including the desire for Ananda's love and companionship. Driven by her desire for freedom and love, she initially attempts to control him through the magical spell. But what is the key theme here? Number one, criticism of the caste system, which later on found expression in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his Dalit movement. Exploration of self-worth. Prakriti's journey explores the concept of self-worth and the importance of recognizing one's own dignity. Irrespective of your social status, you do have a dignity which is akin to the human rights movement. The UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, tells us everybody has a dignity and not only right to live, we should also have a right to live with dignity. These are new concepts, but strangely enough, all of them appeared in some way or another in the works of Tagore. It's so, so beautiful. The play explores the possibility of personal transformation and the pursuit of spiritual liberation through self discovery and questioning societal norms. With this, I would conclude my talk on Tagore's women by saying a century and change after his writing, we are still looking at the same issues plaguing women and their lives in the society. And we also still find his characters walking among us. Victims of negligence, child marriage, society's archaic norms, and more and more. As people struggling for women's rights, as fighting for women's empowerment, we today honor Rabindranath Tagore for his contribution to the cause of women's liberation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you for joining us and giving us time. I'm really thank you. Uh, and ma'am, please stay with us. I think students are, I think, sending you claps and love. I can see, and I hope they will have many questions once we complete with our third speaker. We welcome our third speaker for today and the final speaker, Dr. Manoj Datta. He is an assistant professor of history working in Alia University, West Bengal. His topic is Understanding Rabindranath and Indian History, a Critical Study.
Thank you, Sohini. Am I audible, Sohini?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, actually my camera is not working properly due to some technical glitches. That is why I have to put up my, camera. I'll use my audio instead. So I am really indebted to the organizers and my friend Sohini for giving me this opportunity to share my presentation with two erudite colleagues, especially Nirjhar sir and Sushmita madam. It was really, encouraging for us to do justice to Rabindranath's 164th birthday observation in this moment. So beyond this nationalist and this gender questions, I would like to say something on Rabindranath and his idea of history and especially some sort of ideas on in writing Indian history. So this is largely overlooked by most of these historians across the country, and he has not taken into seriously in the larger domain of history discipline till date in our country. This is a very PT kind of thing for from the discipline of history. So that is why I have decided to say something on Rabindranath and his ideas on global history or history of the universe and special mention to Indian history. So beyond his proliferation on an accomplishment on being a poet, playwright, and perhaps best known literary figure in Bengali literature, we might build some argument saying that he is equally important for exploring the different discourses on global history and diverse sections of Indian history as well. So we know parts of his writing on Indian history, say for example this ভারতবর্ষের ইতিহাস, ঐতিহাসিক চিত্র, issues on Jhansi Rani and some sort of Sufi poet and all, but collectively it is not considered as a very serious text while talking about or dealing with the history of India. So primarily, if I follow the argument of historian like Shobbasati Bhattacharya, uh, who said he if we explore Rabindranath understanding of writing of Indian history or especially the global history per se, so particularly we see three special points mentioned by Rabindranath. Say for example, philosophy of history or the idea about whether human being or a citizen is considered as a free agent or he or she is part of the instrument of the society or the state or are considered as a historical figure. So these things are there. And secondly, historical narrative, events, personalities, and a long-term course of history. And thirdly, beyond history and historiography. So, while talking about especially the history of India, we see some sort of kind of understanding, basically Indian history and the understanding of the British orientation, and of course there is a East-West interaction or divisions. So according to Bhattacharya, he said that while talking about Rabindranath and his ideas on history, one must see this conglomeration of three ideas, like these are interwoven and cannot be isolated or cannot be isolated from each other in order to get a proper understanding of history and of course Indian history. So one must also bear in mind that Rabindranath Tagore is essentially a poet, and his perception of history finds expression not only in his uh, discursive prose but poetry as well. In his Katha o Kahini, which was published in 1908, he showed us a traditional kind of understanding in exploring different genres of Indian history. And there is some sort of kind of fictions and literary criticism are associated with it. So also the existing Buddhist texts helped him understand the you know exclusive and universal orientation of Indian history around this time. So perhaps he found major source of inspiration out of these Buddhist texts, and these are available through his writing. And also he was largely influenced by the medieval saintly traditions associated with Kabir, Tulsidas, and others, and the Vaishnavite poetry and cultures of Mithila and Bengal, along with the cultures of Marathas, Rajasthani legends and folk tales, and also the ideas from the Sikh history or the Sikh community. So these Marathas, Sikh, and Rajasthani culture and heritage also influenced Rabindranath while talking about the Indian history in total. And he got some inspiration out of this diverse cultural heritage. Tagore, in his historical novel, say for Oitihashik Upanyash, observed that a disconnect between actual history and historical narrative exists in Indian history. And this is true for Indian history as well. Tagore recognized the educational value of historical tales and dramas. He did not try to explicate historical events explicitly, he only derived materials and drew inspiration for the latter from the accounts of history. So, if we consider Ranajit Guho, who is the foundational figure of subaltern studies or subaltern historiography compared to the Western historiography, he initially started with writing in English, but after 60s, for the last 30 years, he invested mostly on writing Bengali and trying to portray Rabindranath in a different tone, along with the line followed by Ashin Dasgupta and Sabyasachi Bhattacharya. So these three historical figures, they have put enough emphasis on Rabindranath and his significance and his importance in understanding the diverse terrain of world history as well as Indian history. So now we are really thankful to them in that case. Now, Tagore's, if we read Tagore's writing, so Tagore was initially critique of the colonial historians and their orientation. Because a strong sense of national sentiments or sentiments towards the Indian orientation was there, and that is why Rabindranath said he never wrote history in a narrative form, which is largely followed by the Britishers or by the colonial historians. So, contrary to the colonial historians, he has something to offer which could explicate or understand the different sects of Indian history. So he also believed in regional history, often written by vernacular languages, or better to say Bengali languages. So he was, while talking about this, M.G. Ranade or Mahadev Govindra Ranade of Maharashtra and Akshay Kumar Moitro from Bengal, they have heavily relied on their vernacular text, both Marathi and Bengali. And while Akshay Kumar Moitro in 1899 started the first Bengali journal called Oitihashik Chitro, first historical journal in Bengali language, and it was heavily guided by Rabindranath and morally and materially supported by him as well. So both Akshay Kumar Moitro and Tagore's approach was to see colonial historiography critically and involving the regional sources or the vernacular sources in understanding the regional history compared to the national history or the global history. So Tagore wrote a series of essays from 1898 to 1899, establishing these new trends to perceive the hunger for history, itihash bubukha, hunger for history in order to safeguard or in order to say something on the history and to generate garner interest among the readers, among the avid readers of their history or the history of India, a new style and a new stage in the growth of historical consciousness. Now, according to Tagore, colonial historians offered a textbook account of the external events of Indian history. So, one has to go deeper in understanding the varieties and diversities of Indian history. So, colonial historians focus attention only on the state and on the political order, but one must go beyond the state and political binary or political order, because the social history, history of the caste and history of the other aspects are equally important while dealing with the Indian history. So one should not think about within the binary of state and politics. So Indian society is a larger epitome of all these conglomerating issues, and one must look into it. He not only critiqued the colonial historians but also blamed the Indian counterparts for offering history of their own. So Indian counterparts, the Indian historians are also taken the initiative to describe or to analyze history in a different tone, not entirely following the Western attitude or the colonial attitude in this case. So he wrote isolated pieces on the rise of Shivaji in Maratha country, Sikh history, Lakshmi Bai, the warrior queen of Jhansi during the uprising of 1857. Why? Because he wanted to shed something on Indian history compared to the Western offering of Indian history, because they have described the Westerners or the colonial historians had their different agenda, had their imperialist agenda, which was again and again questioned by Rabindranath through his writing. And he was interested in India's civilization and the search for unity among plurality of culture. So plurality of culture is the cornerstone, is the epitome of strength of India, and also found on India's spirit of syncretism. So this syncretistic culture and this conglomeration of different cultural affinities within one umbrella is important in understanding the holistic approach or holistic inclusivities of India around that time. His particular writings, ঐতিহাসিক চিত্র 1898, ভারতবর্ষের ইতিহাস 1902, ভারতবর্ষের ইতিহাসের ধারা 1912, and Kalantar in 1937, truly highlight the fact that Indian civilization was caseless interplay between the individuality of each of its myriad cultures and the ethnicity and the tendency towards their unification. So Tagore extended the idea to argue that India's quest for unity is diametrically different from that in many other parts of the world. The Western colonial powers sought first to all to destroy the people whose lands they had overrun. And Nirjhar sir has wonderfully described the question of nationalism and how it was portrayed. So why Rabindranath was a ardent critic of these kinds of nationalism, it is now evident for all of us. And also he was a critic of American and European civilization and their way of understanding society. So I won't go much beyond this. So finally, what I am trying to finish up by arguing things like Rabindranath and his idea of writing global history as well as Indian history, that the idea of plurality, the coexistence of these kinds of plural ideas, or the coexistence of these ideas within one universal figure, and then the question of on the idea of syncretism, which is largely prevalent in medieval India and followed in the later part of India, and during the colonial period we do have a different set of understanding, but we could project this is the strength of India to the larger the larger audience, listeners across the globe. And in this current turbulent times, we could offer a different dimension of Indian history, history of the globe to to the audience by engaging, by critically engaging Rabindranath in this case. I am happy that Sushmita madam has engaged Judith Butler, and also I wanted to say Theodore Adorno, another prolific figure in the Western philosophy and Western political thought. So Adorno is also talking about this culture industry. So while talking about the production at the creation of these kinds of cultural industry, in contrast to that, Rabindranath could be a savior for all of us. That he was talking about, he is more of a humanist. He is not simply a figure, poetic personalities or something. So one can say poetry and the poets and their creation could save us in these turbulent times, and we are facing this turbulence, political turbulence and world-like situation across the globe. Not only a problem of India and our neighboring countries, but across the globe is witnessing a different sets of understanding, and that is why Rabindranath was critical to these kinds of nationalism and also the empire and the state making process. So with this, I want to stop my lecture. That I simply want to say that Rabindranath could be explained, could be explored in a larger sense of the term by historians. It is not within the domain of literature, politics, and gender studies, but Rabindranath could be someone. He is for all of us, and he is a transdisciplinary figure, and he could be a savior for this time. And I hope with these kinds of discussion, this will help us to restructure our ideas, reconstruct our ideas on Rabindranath and his diverse projection on Indian history and the history of the globe at this moment. So thank you for your patient hearing. Over to you, Sohini.
Yes. Thank you, Manas sir. Thank you for joining us and delivering your uh, perspectives on the histories and and the influence of Rabindranath Tagore, and how we can go beyond the literature part of Rabindranath Tagore. Means if we take the means, I am very thankful actually. I have seen many, means most of our participants joined from various parts of India, not just from Rajasthan, and they have shown their keen interest in reading Tagore today in Rabindra Jayanti. So I hope, like in my studies, I have remembered I only studied books and poem in literature. So it will be nice if I have some more perspectives, political or gender perspective, to study Premchand. Yes, there are certain research going on, but it is not my area of interest, that it will be difficult for me to go and read those books, original books. So this kind of seminars help us to know beyond our textbook only. So I am grateful teachers who made this possible today. And once we complete with our presidential address by Dilip sir, um, participants can write down your questions in the chat box. Over to you, sir. Dilip sir.
Very good evening to everybody. I think I am audible now. Yeah, very good
Yes, sir,
evening
you
to
are on.
everybody. Yeah, very good evening to everybody, especially the participants and the speakers. The speakers the three speakers, they have talked about the various aspects of Rabindranath Tagore. Uh, Professor Nirjhar, he has talked about nationalism and the uh, annotation of nationalism given by Rabindranath Tagore. Madam Sushmita, she has talked about women's liberty, femininity, or feminism. how Rabindranath has explored these things. And the last speaker, he has talked about the concept of history given by Rabindranath Tagore in his writings. But as I know that as we read, in fact, the texts of Rabindranath Tagore, that we call him Vishwakopi, as if he is a poet, nothing more than that. Or sometimes we can call him only a dramatist or a novelist. But as we have gone through the different texts of Rabindranath Tagore, or whenever we have read many critical books on Rabindranath Tagore, we have realized Rabindranath Tagore is not only a poet, not only a dramatist, not only a short story writer, not only a, in fact, a novelist, rather he is more than that. He has given a kind of opinion related with nationalism, which is very much needed at this moment. I'm coming to this point because now this is the time, a very critical time in our, we are passing, in fact, in our country and throughout the world, in fact. It is the concept of nationalism. Nationalism is taken in a narrow sense, as I can understand. That you know that Rabindranath Tagore was very much interested to roam the different parts of the world, and he was moving from different countries. Uh, many times he has gone to Germany, Italy, Japan, and many other countries to speak about his own mind. And whenever he first time went to Germany, he was invited by that means Italy. Then he was invited by Mussolini, and he was in fact everybody was saying that he has become the fan of that very man, or he has become the fan of or the lover of fascism, like this. But whenever he has come in contact with Einstein, then he has heard many things related with the grassroots realities of these two countries, especially in Italy and Germany. Then he has given up the concept that the two fascists, Hitler and Mussolini, were doing well. And he was vehemently opposing the concepts of feminism and other things. But you know that the Hitler was winning that the heart of the people, not only in Germany but also in other countries also, saying that the nationalism is very much important to develop one country. Germany is for only for the Germans, and only the German can control the whole world and they can develop the world. Or the Mussolini is also thinking that they can do this. This is the concept Rabindranath Tagore was opposing. In fact, he was trying to say that if we think about only nationalism, if we only think about patriotism in a narrow sense, then in fact we are not the citizens of the world. Rabindranath Tagore, as I can understand, is giving emphasis on the concept of the citizenship of the world. A child who is born in the world is not an Indian, not a Pakistani, not a Germany, or not a man of Italy. He is a child of the world. He should not be confined within the concept of a one country. If that is done, then there would be a kind of conflict. And he was, as a result, as I can understand, Rabindranath Tagore was against that type of stereotyped notion of nationalism. He is, he has in fact given a kind of concept of international uh, theory of nationalism. He was always trying to go beyond the narrow concept of nationalism. As you can understand that whenever he has established the university, what is the name of that university? Vishwabharati. This is the university not only for the students of India. from Bharatvarsh. This is the university which is where all students, all the people from different countries will come and learn. And they will go back and will spread the notion of Shanti Niketan. That means Shanti, peace. Rabindranath Tagore is always against any kind of conflict, any kind of barbarism. Now, whatever I was trying to say, that in the name of nationalism, what is going on now at this moment, now we have to rethink about the concept of Rabindranath Tagore, what we have to do, how we have to move in this critical situation. Second thing, that was the situation even during his time. Whenever Jallianwala massacre happened, he did not think about any kind of thing. He gave up the knighthood. He was so determined that in any way, many people may say that he was the real epitome of the example of nationalism. In fact, he was not doing so in the name of nationalism. He was giving up that knighthood only because a group of people have been uh, brutally murdering other group of people in the world. He was, and he was against that type of British torture. Second thing, whatever I can give my own opinion related with the concept given by Sushmita ma'am, very new concept in fact. In fact, she has talked about in fact, the presentation of women in the texts of Rabindranath Tagore. How Rabindranath Tagore would look at the women. Very, in fact, in a clear-cut manner, she has mentioned how Rabindranath Tagore has presented the women in Chitrangoda and Chandali. But only I will say that Rabindranath Tagore, whenever he was in his old age, if you can remember that he wrote three short stories. And these three stories mainly related with the liberation of women. How the women should move forward in this world, how they have been facing the troubles of the world. Laboratory, Tinshangi, and other one. At this moment, I cannot remember this. But in that short stories, if you go through, then you will find how Rabindranath Tagore was looking at the women. Very realistically and very critically, he has presented the critical situation what the women have been facing and how they have been moved. It cannot be said Rabindranath Tagore was against women or he has presented any women in his text from the masculine point of view or from a so-called the so-called male-dominated society point of view. Always Rabindranath Tagore was in favor of the women. He was very much delighted to see that the women would move forward as a human being, as a male one. I think that he was not making any kind of demarcation between male and female, that women are inferior to men. That type of concept I did not find in any text of that. Last one, whatever the last speaker has said related with history, it is a new concept. In fact, I was not aware of all these things. So the Rabindranath Tagore even talking about history. In general conception of history is it is the facts related with the so-called kings and queens. And Rabindranath Tagore, we know that is not so much interested in rulers. The basic rulers means he was very much related with, and he was very much sympathetic towards the or he was very much aware of the history of the common people. He was a Jamindar, but whenever he went to Shilaidaho, then he was not playing the role as a Jamindar. Rather, he was trying to mix up with the people. He was very much interested to present his own vision. And he was, in fact, showing a kind of sympathy towards them. And he was also expressing his grief that he could not lead that type of life, being a man of Jamindar family. But even after that, he has appealed to everybody, saying that I should be remembered by you. Ami tumadari lo. This is the concept, in fact, he has tried to indicate in history that history, whatever we learn today in the name of history, it should be deep rooted. It should be connected with the common people. And the real history, in fact, the history of the common people, not the history of the so-called the rulers, few rulers are like this. And whatever, in fact, at the end of my presentation, whatever I will say, but in fact, I would request all of you to go to his lecture given by his lecture whenever he received the Nobel Prize in 1921, perhaps 26th May. Rabindranath Tagore was invited to give his Nobel lecture, and in his lecture he was in fact repeatedly saying that I am here to appeal to everybody that we have to think about human civilization and how to educate them. This is not a kind of education what we feel today. This is a kind of education while the people will remain in union. So the whole world there would be in a particular place and they would live their life in a peaceful manner. And again and again he was appealing to the people to visit Vishwabharati and to think about the concept of Vishwabharati. And at last, in his lecture, whatever he said, I want to read this thing for all of you. What he said: man is not to fight with other human races, other human individuals, but his work is to bring about a reconciliation and peace, and to restore the bonds of friendship and love. We are not like fighting beasts. It is the life of self which is predominating in our life. The self which is creating the seclusion, giving rise to sufferings, to jealousy and hatred, to political and commercial competition. All these illusions will vanish if we go down to the heart of shrine, to the love and to unity of all races. Rabindranath Tagore, as a result, is, as we call him, out of love, Bishop of Beef. He is a writer who has talked about whole human civilization. I am very much grateful to the organizers who have invited me to be present here to express my own thoughts related with Rabindranath Tagore. And I am also delighted to learn something here, new concepts related with Rabindranath Tagore, related with nationalism, feminism, and related with history. So, from my part, I express my thanks to everybody. especially the organizers and the speakers, those who have unfurled new areas related to Rabindranath. Thanks to all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving us time from your busy schedule. And uh, before taking the questions, I would like Arijit sir, the editor of Global Authors Publication, a few words, and then we will go to question and answers.
First of all, I would like to thank to all of you to participate here, because without the participation, your active participation, this seminar will not be succeed. That's why first of all, I thank everyone, especially the chairman sir and our guest speakers, and of course our moderator Sohini. And uh, I hope
Sir,
that this hello,
mute.
hello,
Arijit sir, mute.
okay,
Dilip sir.
yes.
Okay.
So I hope that this session will be very helpful for our authors. Actually, we publish the research papers. That's the reason we conducted this type of seminar and webinar to sensitize the mind of the scholars and writers. Hopefully this seminar will be helpful to sensitize the author's mind, and they will put the concepts and the critical connotations to their up upcoming scripts and chapters. Those who mainly we will publish this scripts in our upcoming volumes. So thankful, I am very thankful to all for that. Thank you. Shoini, is up to you.
Okay, sir, also ask the participants to write the questions in the chat box. Okay, you can write the questions in the chat box.
Sohini, there is one question I think directed to me, which I saw.
Yes, sir.
The question was that Virginia Woolf and Rabindranath Tagore, how did they talk about women's rights? And they're speaking on the suppression of women. There is a question like that. I saw it. Is it relevant in today's world or not? Well, I would answer that question. Somebody asked it. I don't know the name. The first question that was there about a suppression of women. So I would say yes, there are two areas in which both Virginia Woolf and Rabindranath Tagore spoke then at that point of time, and they are relevant even today. One area is the fight against patriarchy. Once again, I repeat, the fight against patriarchy was there and is there even today. That's number one. Number two, the second issue that was addressed by both these writers were questioning societal norms, which is very, very relevant even today. Questioning societal norms, not just in the area of the second gender, but also third gender. This is so important today that we are questioning the what is normative. We are trying to understand, we are trying to subvert. We have already had a subversion theory, a radical theory, post feminism. So all these things are coming up, which are questioning what we have already learned to believe for so many years. So as far as Virginia Woolf and Rabindranath Tagore are concerned, both of them were very, very eloquent at a period when it was very difficult to speak on these issues like gender fluidity. This is so relevant today, but gender fluidity, non normativity, sexual deviations. These are concepts and topics that are emerging in today's world, in the modern world as we know it today. But these were important debates at a time when we people at that point of time could not even think of it. Women were hardly educated. They hardly studied. They hardly knew the texts. So for them, it was very difficult to fight. But again, these two areas were similar. I find a common similarity in the works of both Tagore and Virginia Woolf. That's the answer to my question. Thank you. Again, another question to me again. Sociology, yes. One more question is to me. I think I read it just now. Somebody asked in Hindi.
First question was asked by Neha Jha.
Somebody asked me in Hindi. To Sushmita ma'am, they said a sociological perspective of feminism. To explain it, somebody asked me. Well, sociological perspective, first point I would say that I was dealing with the issue from a political narrative, that is gender. But society, yes, sociology means first caste is important. Caste. This is so important. Now, caste is one factor, huh? And gender is another factor. Okay. Now, when caste and gender are uh, intersecting, we have a very important concept in gender studies called intersectionality. Intersectionality is a very, very important concept that is coming up. In fact, I feel today Tagore's work, Chondalika, can be read from intersectionality perspective because it combines two important sociological factors, which is gender and caste. That area can be explored in future books written by different authors. Thank you. Thank you, Sohini.
Thank you for the questions, Neha Jha and Rekha Tripathi. And we have another question. I think it's for Nirjhar sir. As we have discussed, I want to understand what, in a world where increasingly divided by identity politics, how can Tagore's idea of universal humanism guide us towards more inclusive nationalism? Sir, are you there?
Yes, hello. Yes, Nadeem, thank you for your question. Basically, the thing is that Tagore was not talking about an inclusive nationalism, actually. That is a mistake that some people intentionally or unintentionally make. Intentionally, for what purposes, it's not everyone knows why. But basically, Tagore was a nationalist in his early days, but later on he turned his back on nationalism, and his critique of nationalism remained persistent from 1904, as I mentioned in my lecture. Now, on the question of identity politics, we have got to know from Sushmita ma'am's lecture and also many other places that Tagore was deeply sympathetic to the question of Dalits, the question of women, the question of people of other genders. And if we read his other works, such as Kabuliwala, he was also very much in favor of the rights of Muslims against Islamophobia. And as I have already discussed in Ghore Baire, that is Home and the World, like he was already very critical about how the Swadeshi movement was creating communal tensions because in the name of Swadeshi nationalism, there was Islamophobic tendencies, all these problems were there. So he was deeply sympathetic to the question of marginalized minorities and he was in favor of their empowerment and their rights. However, this doesn't strictly mean that Tagore was someone into identity politics because the kind of identity politics that maybe Ambedkarites do, that was not Tagore's politics. He did want the politics of inclusion, a politics of an inclusive society, but not nationalism. Here, I would conclude by only one important thing that Tagore Tagore was talking about liminalities. He was talking about other possibilities. Like, uh, do we have to live in a nation state? Like, do we really have to live in terms of nations? I mean, do we need a world divided by nations? Can't there be other units of living? Like, these were important questions that Tagore was mooting up. Perhaps he didn't give any concrete answers. Like, much like Marx wasn't very didn't give a very concrete answer of how a future communistic society would look like. Neither did Tagore. Tagore had some very creative and concrete answers regarding education and how people would be educated in a new kind of university system like Vishwabharati, or some other kind of systems. But what he was definitely challenging was the idea of a nation. So we could just live in societies without the ideas of nations, without strict, rigid borders. These were things that Tagore was talking. So, like, if we see in many parts of the so-called Northeast India and also so-called Southeast Asia, there were many groups of people or tribes, as the European colonialists would like to label them. These people did not have the idea of a nation state. They didn't have the idea of a nation state and borders, but they have been living in those areas for hundreds of years. So, like, it is possible to live outside the imagination of the nation state. Tagore was challenging the essentiality of nation and nationalism, which he essentially called a bad import from the West. So, while Tagore was definitely talking about empowerment of oppressed identities, their rights, their dignified lives. Like, he was more than a feminist. Perhaps he didn't call himself a feminist, but he was more than a feminist, quite a radical one. He was in favor of the rights of the Dalits, the oppressed. He was also in favor of the rights of Muslims and their voice. There are concrete texts where he says that, but he wouldn't talk about a different kind of nationalism. He would challenge the grammar of nationalism itself. Rather, what Tagore's political thought inspires us to do is to think beyond binaries, think beyond the existing framework of nationalism. If there are other possibilities, what other kind of possibilities of living together we can do? Thank you.
Thank you, Nirjhar sir. Thank you for all the questions. I think we can conclude the webinar. Arijit sir,
Yes, sure.
Rahul sir is here.
Rahul sir, Rahul Mishra sir, are you here? Rahul sir, Dr. Rahul Mishra, Rahul sir,
I think
Dr.
he's
Rahul
not.
Mishra. I don't know here or not.
Sir, you conclude them.
Dr. Rahul Mishra, I think he is not here. So I would like to thank to all on behalf of Dr. Rahul Mishra, joint convener of the session. Mm, So thanks to all, especially our chairman sir and our distinguished speakers for give us their valuable time and spend valuable their valuable times with us and share their very knowledgeful thoughts with us. Thank you all.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
This is the end of the program. Thank you.
Mm. Record which?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
শেয়ার করে
We
দেব।
will, huh, we will send it later.
ওকে,
Bye.
বাই।